Hello, I'm Tanya McRae. Welcome to In Focus California, a new statewide show highlighting the issues and the decision makers shaping everyday life across California. To kick off this first show, we're in Sacramento at our state capitol, talking to two of the state's most influential leaders. Senate Minority Leader Brian Jones, who serves as head of the Senate Republican Caucus, and California Attorney General Rob Bonta, who is the chief legal officer and top law enforcement official in the state. Attorney General Bonta, thank you so much for coming into our studio today.
Pleasure.
It's good to see you in person.
It's good to see you in person.
You serve and solve problems for the 39 million people who call California home. And in the first 14 months of the Trump administration, you filed 65 lawsuits. And they cover a lot of different topics, ranging from the environment to civil rights to education and many more. And that number is quadruple the pace of lawsuits filed on behalf of the people of California from Trump's first term. Is there any one topic or overarching issue that you feel you're addressing right now?
The lawsuits that we've brought so far fall into a number of buckets. One big bucket is California's funding, and we've protected and defended $200 billion worth of funding that Congress has appropriated to California for California to spend for things like healthcare and housing and food and public schools, but Trump has unlawfully tried to withhold from us. So that's kind of one major bucket of our work. Another one is protecting our rights and our freedoms, constitutional rights, things like birthright citizenship, the right to be a citizen. If you're born on U.S. soil, that's right in the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The right to vote and not have your vote be discounted or not counted or your vote suppressed. That's another right that we've protected. And then sort of two really big cases that affected California. One is we brought the case that ended the unlawful federalization and deployment of the California National Guard in Los Angeles and in other parts of the state. It was improper and unlawful. We fought that case tooth and nail for 6 months, from federal trial courts all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, where a final ruling there made it clear that the National Guard was unlawfully deployed and could no longer be lawfully deployed in California. So that was a big win. We also were part of the effort to strike down the unlawful tariffs that were visited upon Californians, California businesses. Tariffs are taxes. Congress has the power to tax, not the president. And the Supreme Court saw through his actions and said, you don't have the authority to do this. These tariffs are unlawful. And he owes refunds now to the tune of billions of dollars to Americans who deserve their refunds with interest immediately, getting that money back in their pocket.
A lot of the lawsuits that you have filed are a part of a coalition in collaboration with 15 states, 20 states, 30 states. Have you ever filed lawsuits with this kind of a coalition with so many other states before? That seems unique.
It is unique. And I'm a team player. I try to be. I grew up playing team sports. I played soccer. Now I play soccer very slowly and badly, but I still love it. But that team spirit is still part of how I approach the work. I think we're better when we're working together in collaboration and in partnership with others, when we can rely on each other's expertise, our institutional knowledge, our different talents, our different resources, and come together and create together a whole that's more than the sum of their parts. And the 24 Democratic attorneys general have created such a coalition, and we share thoughts and ideas around actions by the Trump administration and conduct that we believe is unlawful, and we decide if and when to sue.
One of those joint lawsuits is you are co-leading a coalition of 16 attorneys general in suing HUD for enforcement of the 1968 Fair Housing Act. What's the basis for that lawsuit?
So in California, for example, we support our military service members and our veterans. And federal law does not protect against discrimination directed towards veterans and military service people. And now is saying, we're not going to work with you, we're not going to give you funding if you dare to protect that veteran from discrimination. We think that that's wrong. We think that's not what the law is. And we think it's the federal executive branch acting outside of its authority by trying to essentially unilaterally change existing law.
More with Attorney General Rob Bonta in just a few minutes, plus my conversation with Senator Brian Jones, laying out the top issues for the Senate Republican Caucus this year. Welcome back to In Focus, California. Here's more of my conversation with California Attorney General Rob Bonta. You're suing the Trump administration for its attempt to take federal control over 2 of California's onshore pipelines. What are the concerns with them taking control, and what are the concerns specifically related to our coastlines?
Because they're intrastate pipelines in California, California has a regulatory oversight authority over them to determine if they're safe, when they can operate, if they can operate, under what conditions they can operate. These pipelines are also the pipelines that led to the Refugio oil spill in Santa Barbara County in 2015, devastating in terms of its impact on public health and on the environment. Since that oil spill, there have been consent decrees in federal court that impose requirements for safety. So this is really just Trump providing giveaways to the fossil fuel industry, which, as we know, he had an agreement with them during his campaign that they'd spend $1 billion or some amount on his campaign to help him get elected. This is him paying them back, unfortunately.
You filed an amicus brief about the conditions of confinement at the Adelanto ICE Processing Center, one of the largest immigration detention centers in the United States. What did your team find in terms of the conditions when they went there?
That the conditions were shockingly and appallingly inadequate, that the health, safety, and welfare of the human beings in these facilities were at risk, that we found that Adelanto grew exponentially. I think they had like 7 detainees in 2023. They're now around 1,500, and includes all sorts of different violations: inadequate food, lack of access to clean water, inadequate clothing, health care that is delayed or insufficient or not provided, emergency care that's not provided, excessive use of force, lack of access to telephones so that the detainees can contact their attorneys and have the right to counsel. I authored a bill called AB 32. It banned for-profit private prisons and for-profit private immigration detention centers in the state of California. It was passed by the legislature, it was signed by the governor. The federal government challenged the aspect regarding immigration detention centers, and so that is no longer the law going forward. And our job is to shed light on it, shine a light on what's happening inside, and make sure the world knows.
2026 marks 10 years of California's gun violence restraining order. You were one of the original co-sponsors of that bill. You recently unveiled some new tools to help more communities prevent shootings. Tell me about those.
Yeah. First, I'll say, having been a legislator for 8+ years before I became Attorney General, there have been multiple times where a law that I authored or I co-authored, I'm now in a position to enforce or implement. And this is one of those examples. Back in 2016, there was a tragic incident in Isla Vista near UC Santa Barbara, where an individual who was showing signs that he might commit a violent act using a firearm actually did commit a violent act using a firearm, and it was devastating and tragic. And folks looked at that incident and said, well, what could have been done here to prevent this from happening? And the gun violence restraining order was born. And California was first in the nation in moving forward on this tool. And it basically says that if there are signs, threats, an individual says that they're going to harm people, or writes that he or she is going to harm people, you can go into court and secure a gun violence restraining order that can prevent that individual from having firearms and hopefully preventing a mass shooting or another tragedy like the one in Isla Vista. And the go forward, to answer your question about what we are recommending going forward, more training on how to use gun violence restraining orders is one, and really trying to make it clear that gun violence restraining orders aren't punishing past conduct, they're preventing future conduct. So if a court issues a gun violence restraining order and then the order exists but the individual still has their firearms for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that increases the public safety risk. But if as soon as the gun violence restraining order is issued, that individual can have their firearms removed, that makes everyone more safe.
My last question for you is, as a state attorney general, when you wake up in the morning and you first open your eyes, is there just a sigh of what is today going to bring, or I'm looking forward to this, or oh, this is going to be a tough day? What is your mindset?
Yeah, you know, I'm hardwired hopeful. I'm positive. I'm hopeful. I'm grateful that I have the privilege of the role that I'm in. When I wake up in the morning, I sort of start with the premise that you know, these times are predictably unpredictable. So, I don't expect them to be predictable. I expect them to be unpredictable. That we need to, you know, shift and pivot, you know, on a dime and you know, prioritize based on unfolding events. I feel very grateful that I have this role in these times, and there's a lot at stake right now. And I know Californians are anxious and worried and concerned about what has happened, where we're headed, and what might come next.
Attorney General Bonta, thank you so much for the time that you've given us today. I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate it.
So good to be with you. I'm honored to be with you. Yeah. Thank you.
Inside this Capitol, Senator Brian Jones is the minority leader of the Senate Republican Caucus and the top-ranking Republican in the state, representing California's 40th Senate District, which spans much of inland San Diego County, including the cities of Santee, Escondido, and Poway. We talk about crime, the cost of living, education, and more. Senator Jones, thanks so much for coming to our studio. It's a pleasure to have you here
today.
Thanks,
Tanya. I'm glad to be back.
Let's start with an issue that is affecting so many Californians from top to bottom, and that is the cost of living right now. And what are the issues that you are addressing in the Senate to help ease those burdens?
The most immediate thing we can do to begin having an impact on the cost of living is oil extraction in California. A lot of Californians don't realize that Kern County in California is one of the most oil-rich areas of the world and certainly of the country. And we have the ability to extract the crude oil and produce the fuel that Californians need. Unfortunately, with the governor's burdensome environmental regulations that really he's been pushed into applying over the last 10 years has negatively impacted that industry in California. Now we're importing crude oil from other countries, and now because of the closure of the refineries in California, we're actually importing finished gasoline and finished diesel from other refineries, some in the United States, but mostly from Asian countries. And we're shipping that crude oil and that finished fuel across the ocean in big tanker ships that burn the dirtiest fuel you can burn under the guise of we're protecting the environment in California. California is the safest place to extract and refine oil. It's the safest environmentally, and it's the safest for the workers.
Are there any other aspects of the cost of living that the California Senate is dealing with right now?
Well, we're trying to look at the burdensome regulations on construction, on tenement improvements, and those kind of things, just to get more houses built. A huge portion of a new home, I think it's between 20 and 30% of the cost of a new home is government regulation and burdensome permitting fees and those kind of things. So we want to impact that. We want to clean up CEQA. Actually, I'm very pleased that several of my Democrat colleagues want to do that as well. So we are working in a bipartisan fashion to find a solution to CEQA.
Another top issue here in California is the homelessness crisis. And that is something that has sort of evolved in your district. What does that look like, and what are the challenges you're facing right now?
Yeah, there's two things happening at the same time that are actually contradictory to each other that are driving this homeless situation, I believe. And one is the governor closing prisons and emptying out prisons across the state. And if you look at the same time that that's happening, the homeless population has increased. We have almost 180,000 homeless people in California. Now, I'm not arguing that homeless people necessarily need to be in prison, but we know the governor has paroled people that should still be in prison that are on the streets. And those are the people that are probably causing the biggest challenges for Californians. There is a population of homelessness in California. There are people that are down on their luck and need a hand up to get out of their situation and become contributing members of California society. And I think we have the safety net for those people and to be able to help them and get them on their feet. People that are homeless and are continuing to live a life of crime need to be held accountable to that.
Data has shown that a large population of the homeless in California are people with mental health problems and people with addiction issues.
Right.
Do you have those kind of programs in your district right now? Are you working to expand those?
San Diego actually has a homeless consortium of different groups that meet on a regular basis to work together. I've got a group out in the eastern part of my district called East County Transitional Living. They are working with the federal government and the White House on some of their programs right now. They are very good.
More from my conversation with California Senate Minority Leader Brian Jones as In Focus California continues. Welcome back to In Focus California here in Sacramento at our state capitol. Let's get back to our conversation with Senate Minority Leader Brian Jones. Crime and public safety is another top priority, and you've authored a number of bills about tightening crime laws and parole regulations.
Right.
What do you hope to accomplish with that?
As soon as I got elected, I think it was even before I got sworn in, the time between November and December in 2018, one of the very first phone calls we got was from a constituent in the Mount Helix, La Mesa area of my district, telling me about this program called Sexual and Violent Predators. I wasn't even familiar with it, wasn't familiar with it from when I was in the assembly, and they're walking me through this, and the state has a program that these sexually violent predators, once they've finished their prison sentence, they go to the state hospital system for a civil commitment to rehabilitate and then be released back into our neighborhoods. The breakdown in the system is when they're required to release them. And so we immediately went to work to overhaul this program. It's taken us 8 years, but we have had some success. We got an audit approved on a bipartisan vote several years ago that audited the state hospitals program for the sexual violent predators. One of the things that came back was the state hospitals and the state need to operate the transitional housing and not be putting these people into neighborhoods.
You are trying to make a mark with the next generation of leaders, and your team has created an internship program to give young people a first-hand look at what happens in government, how to get into government, what do you do once you're in government. What advice do you give those interns when they come in about the difference that they can make in the future?
So if you go into my district office on any given day, there's going to be at least a half a dozen interns. Last year we did a intern reunion day, and I was able to come down and visit with all my interns. We had I think between 50 and 60 interns on that particular day, and it's not partisan. We don't ask the interns if you're Republican or Democrat or no party. We don't even ask them if they're registered to vote, and some of them aren't because they're not citizens. And so what we want to expose these young people to, what is the purpose of government? Why is the district office of a state senator important, and what does it do to serve its constituents? And how do we make government work for the people?
Social media has become an important part of elected officials communicating with their constituents. And my understanding is you are a very popular guy on Instagram.
Yes, the Sacramento Bee actually did an expose a couple months ago on a couple of us. At the time, I was the #1 followed legislator on Instagram. And really, that's not a brag on me. That's a brag on my team that put all of my stuff together. I was just smart enough to go where they told me to go, say what they told me to say, and do what they told me to do, because we want to communicate with Californians where they are. And we want to be a voice that kind of shows what's actually going on in the Capitol, without the filters of the news or the filters of politics or the filters of personalities. And so I think we've been very effective at that. I've been very blessed by the response and the subscriptions on our platforms, and I think we're having an impact on that.
Yeah. And it really is a way for you to connect with and reach people that might not ordinarily know what you're doing. They may not see your press releases.
Right,
they
exactly.
may not see a press conference that
Right.
you've done. From your perspective, is there one thing that will make the biggest difference to Californians that needs to be done now?
I think there's three things. And so the first thing is, again, the oil extraction, oil refining, and lowering the prices of gasoline. The second thing is Prop 36 and continuing to fund Prop 36 and get public safety as a priority in California. And the third thing is fair elections. Voter ID is going to be on the ballot in November, and I think that's going to make a huge difference in our elections and making sure that Californians of every political background trust the outcome of those elections. Those three things together, if we concentrated just on those three things, I think everything else would fall in place.
Senator Jones, I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk with me today.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching In Focus California. We'll see you next time.